So we've all made it through the month of May. The struggles going on in this country that just kind of worry me, to be honest. But in the habitat world, there's a lot of stuff that has been done. It's been created and maintained, all focused towards the success of the fall, and being successful in those new sets, or how powerful them food plots that we planted were. But there's an issue. The month of June is ahead of us, and what is next? What should you be doing? What shouldn't you be doing? And the number one topic here that I think is overlooked in so many ways is the fact that folks are going about these improvements without keeping the end goal in mind, as far as point of impact or stand locations. Now, I probably wouldn't have such a strong opinion on this if I didn't do this for a living and see so many different aspects, or so many different opinions on how to set up these farms, and what to do, and what works, what doesn't. You can see behind me here, this is a native grass planting, switchgrass planting that was done about 6 years ago. It's going on its 7th year. And this is a perfect example of taking a set-aside area, if you will, and converting it into usable wildlife habitat. Not only deer, but wildlife in general. But I see a lot of these situations going on that are being looked at without an end goal. And if you don't have an end goal or design, like I always speak of, the power of these designs set in place by someone that either yourself, that has been lucky enough to travel the country and see what works and what doesn't in certain areas, you set yourself up for a disaster plan. Because what happens is these situations end up being a long-term focus, and the short-term goal is thrown aside. So we're just going to do a little walk here, walk and talk as we go. What I would like to help folks with, and one of my main goals is to help folks understand that when you're putting boots on the ground on these properties, and you're starting the process of design, and you're implementing improvements, so many improvements are not improvements at all. So many improvements are not tied to contour. They're not tied to the lay of the land. They're not tied to simply the landowners, the hunters that need to be hunting them. This goes for public land as well. I see a lot of guys going into areas, focusing on areas, taking advice, taking all the time that it requires to go into an area, and really focusing on where they should be deep into these state land areas, and around habitat improvements that have been done by, let's say, the state or the government. And then it comes fall and they're unable to hunt it, because the key thing that they left out was stand placement. How do I get in it? How do I get out of it? You've heard me talk about that a million times, and you'll probably hear me talk about it a million more. The fact of the matter is, I see thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds and hundreds of acres that are improved because, like we've always talked about in the past, these fads and these myths and the stuff that people believe in, and that doesn't, that they believe that works because they're told it works, and they haven't implemented the projects themselves, and they haven't failed. And so somewhere it has to start, and it starts with the old school of hard knocks. Now, such as this here, this wasn't a bad move 7 years ago in this opening, is because it's not a perfect location for a food plot. The reason that I'm standing over this, talking about this area right here, is 95% of the people that reach out to me, or that I help on a customer basis, would have planted this to a food plot. Reason is, wide open. The Lord gave us this beautiful opening, and boy, that should be a food plot. This is a perfect example to show that this is a non-huntable area. It doesn't matter if you have what you had planted in it. The only way that we could have planted this to hunt it is to plant a screen along it. But the problem with it is the access, because of the prevailing winds, the north and west winds that we get here in this area, a lot of in this area where this is at, is unhuntable. So the landowner in this situation didn't want to go in and put a bunch of money into recreating or creating, let's say, the proper doe bedding areas off the edge of the food here. We have a creek bottom that runs this whole shelf right here, if you will. So all the doe bedding now is about 200 yards, and I know this property very well. I actually used to own this property. It's about 200 yards up into this timber. Well, over years since we've owned this, it's been over 20 years now, this bedding area has become mature timber. So now there's absolutely no value to the bedding portion of it. It's a beautiful timber stand location. I'll show you some pictures here, but timber improvement to no end, and very, very little habitat improvements on a hunting spectrum. So what that's done is, instead of pushing now the bedding, what should have been done out here to this location, because of that non-enhanced or non-habitat improved correctly, the bedding area is now forced further to the back. This client here, this customer here, can benefit because of this. The only thing that saves him is he owns 480 acres. So when I say that it was pushed back 200 yards, 300 yards further than it used to be, already 200 yards off the edge of what used to be field and a food source, he's now almost internal of his 480. So that sounds okay, but to a guy like me that designs these properties every day, he just lost about 80 acres of valuable habitat improvements. Now, like I said, this area now, because of what has been done behind it, now can be enhanced, or could be enhanced properly, as a food source, as a destination food source. Before, when we planted this, there was absolutely no way to create within his budget, to create the bedding areas that needed to be enhanced. And that is where the disconnect comes in. There are so many of these projects being designed from afar, implemented by folks that just don't have the experience. And when it comes to the landowners, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you're failing. You failed at this. You have failed. It's a connection with a bunch of misinformation that's out there, that's being labeled professional opinions, that's getting you into those troubles. And that's frustrating for a guy like me that sees this on a day-to-day basis, that this is happening. Because what's happening is it's followed by, like I've always said in the past, it's followed by a long line of improvements that have to follow that, which is connected to the almighty dollar. So what I recommend that folks do is to kind of follow my lead on this, and is to really focus on what needs to be done where, and how to. The topic of this video is stand placements. It's a long way around to get to that, but this is all tied back to stand placements. I see a lot of the habitat improvements being done, bedding areas, switchgrass pockets, switchgrass areas in general, oceans of switchgrass being planted, screens being planted with Egyptian weed, or let's say long-term screening as far as white pine and spruce. And the folks are struggling with it for years and years and years, is because, I'll show you here, is because right off the end of it, right down there, there is a tower blind that you can see from about 300 yards in any direction. Not only can you see it from 300 directions, can I see it from 300 or from any direction at 300 yards. The deer can also see it. So, perfect example of just not knowing how to fit the proper habitat to the proper property. There's a way to cure that. The way to cure that is to start before, even if you don't hire anybody to do these improvements, even if you don't hire someone such as myself to design the property, what I recommend that you do is I recommend that you invest in Onyx Hunt, or there's a couple other platforms. I recommend Onyx because it's user friendly to most folks. What I recommend doing is if you know the property and you feel very comfortable that you know the ins and outs of the property, you have more power than a lot of folks that are going to tell you how the property needs to hunt. But it has to start with a design. You have to take the time on Onyx to sit down, think these projects through, design them to fit your contour, and start with an outside-in mentality, side access, and create these properties to perform out of your point of impacts as far as your stand locations. Now, you can have the best property in the world, you can have the best food plots in the world. Like I tell folks every day that I set feet on these properties, one I'm going to be on actually today coming up, and a few more later this week, that this stands very true. You can have the best food plots in the world, you can have the best agricultural farm in the world, you can have the best, what you feel is the best bedding area in the world, but if your stand placements are not in the perfect location, as far as not the easiest location to hunt, to see everything with a rifle or to see numerous amounts of deer, but the perfect location as far as being able to get in and out using contour, using the lay of the land, and placing the habitat improvements that you're doing to fit your stand locations, you're doing yourself an injustice. You are creating more of a problem than you are a habitat improvement. So, when I design these properties, when I start the whole cycle of these properties, I not only look to the area, obviously I connect that with the landowners and their experiences on their past experiences, their future goals, and how the property fits that spectrum. Perfect example is I have a customer that is very, very detailed and very frugal, and I appreciate that. I respect that opinion, and he's probably out here watching this video right now. His property is very powerful. He's got a 40-acre parcel in Osceola County, Michigan, and it's very, very, very powerful. The property needs to be select cut. It's got a lot of old growth oak, hard maple, beech, and it needs to be select cut. Now, he wants to, obviously, we've designed that property and he wants to get that property up and running just as fast as he can. But he has to keep in mind that he has that he has that habitat improvement that has to be done, that timber stand improvement, to get his habitat correct. So instead of going in and creating these bedding areas and establishing these food plots and then having the worry of the logger coming in and using, being as respectful as they can within their time frame, going in and cutting these properties and have to worry about smashing water holes or debris and everything else. And what that's going to, I explained to him yesterday, is what that's going to do is it's going to create havoc. It's going to create a headache for the project at hand. So what he needs to do is he needs to wait until that timber is improved to complete the entirety of his project. That way the logger gets in and out. Then you can go in and you can fix the destruction that was left behind. You can place the stuff where it needs to be placed. You can plant your switchgrass where it needs to be planted, and really seal the deal on that property for the next 20 years. reason I brought that property up is because the gentleman is really sweating the steps, and he's I think we're to the point now that he understands that I'm very, very honest about this stuff, and I'm very forward when it comes to not handcuffing your property because of wrong steps, wrong moves. And he has the ability and the knowledge to kind of be a like I explained to him, was to kind of be a general contractor, if you will, on his property. Now, you won't hear a lot of professionals in my industry tell you that, because they want to do it and they want to tell you everything that there is to do. Well, my whole goal is after I design these properties, after we make that first initial analysis package, I'm your consultant. I'm not your foreman. I'm not your general on your project. A lot of the stuff is getting implemented by the landowner themselves. That's the whole goal, is to save you money or to know your budget of how much you're looking at in the future to spend, how much it's going to take to plant your plots, how much it's going to take to maintain your plots, how much it's going to, what your timber, your management goals are in the future. All that comes into it. But his situation is he needs to make the improvements that can be improved outside of the logging to get that property to perform now. And how that ties into stands. It ties into those stand locations, because if you just hunt the property from where he had been hunting it before, or moving stand locations in like a climber situation, let's say, and following the movement of the deer, he doesn't have the volume of stationary destination feed locations to keep those deer on those does on a pattern every day, and the bucks to circulate early season through the rut, and to continuously have that point of impact the same. That point of impact is changing the entire time of that property. You're always trying to chase a property that's chasing itself, and it's never going to connect. So that's where the power and the stand locations is powerful. So the reason I'm in this corner is because this is a location that, once this is taken to the next step, if I were to design this property now, after helping this gentleman, and we just, since we owned it, I never did a full build of this property. We just did a bunch of filling areas in that recommended him to do years ago before I was doing this full time, and planted it to switchgrass, and that's one of the best things that ever happened in that area. But the reason I'm in this corner is because this location right behind us here is a spot that I would have coined as a stand location. And the reason that is I'll show you. Normal thought process of coming in to this stand location, or how they have hunted it now, is they have hunted this location years upon years upon years, time after time after time, of accessing through this 2-track. This is actually this would be their east border, and they're accessing it from the north. This is their east fence line, that's the north. In this situation, their bedding area is right directly that way to the south. So they're walking down. They're not only walking down the east side of their property line, which is great on a west wind, but they're not ending here. It goes right directly past this stand location that would be perfect for side access. They're actually following this creek shelf, river shelf, if you will, pond shelf, and they go right around the end of it, right up into a stand location that's up here on the bank, and it's being hunted time and time again. The problem with that is that's the only doe bedding area. Now that the habitat is changed out here, that is one of the #1 bedding areas on that 480 acre parcel that I'm standing on right now. And this is how they access it, and that's where they go into to hunt their stand location. Interior access, side access that started as side access turned into interior access that blew this entire portion of this farm out. And all could have been done by a side access that was started and dropped into the stand location right behind me right here that I have pinned years ago. And the reason is this pond levee is right here, and this trail comes right down, can tuck right behind the back side of this pond levee, right up over the top of the pond levee, right into the stand, everything is untouched. Everything is undisturbed, and right out in front of it there's a scrape that has been there for 20 years, and 30 yards in front of the stand location, that tree has never had a stand in it outside of 20 years ago when I had one in it myself. So this is the power, not only showing access and explaining this to folks of how this all ties together. This access is a, sorry for spinning around here, I'm doing this all by myself today. This access started down, like I said, the east side, but in this case, in a lot of our predominant winds come from the north and the northwest later season during the rut. And you have to set all these, I designed these properties, obviously they you design this so you can hunt on any wind, and that's a topic I'll touch on about that 40 acres I was just explaining to you about. But this situation, they're accessing from the north. If you're accessed from the north, your wind's to your back. Not only are they walking into the bedding area, their wind is blowing into the bedding area. That bedding area is totally blown before they even get into it, and then that's where they're sitting. And it's a huge disconnect. The reason I brought that 40 back into the topic here of discussion is the gentleman, after we got done designing it, the gentleman asked me, he said, one of his questions that he relayed back to me was, a list of questions, which is fine. And one of the questions was, how are we going to hunt these in these stands on the we get a lot of prevailing westerly winds in their area, which is true. And how are we going to hunt those stands, because our west wind, our scent is going to be blowing internal of the farm. So these stands, because of the way that the contour of the farms he had more like 2 or 3 more stands on the west side of his property than he did the east side. And his question was, how am I going to hunt that without my wind blowing internal of the property and getting winded? And I told him, I guarantee you that you will not get winded hunting those stands on a west wind. You will not get winded from those stands. I said, and the reason is because you won't be in them. If you are hunting in them on a west wind, don't tell me about it. And after I said that, I think it generated with him that it is the perfect stand. It's your obligation to hunt it right with the right wind, because it's there. You can access it. You just have to hunt it in an AM situation on a northeast wind, not a west wind. So once you tie them, that's a perfect example. And the reason I brought that up is once you tie that into a customer's outlook, a client's outlook, they understand very quickly of the mistakes that they've been making. This is a 480 acre parcel that I'm standing on, guys, and this stand location right here is 50 yards from the neighbor's fence line and has never had a stand in that in 20 years. And the neighbors that are just to the east of this property continuously kill great deer off that bedding area. And you want to know why them deer are coming off that bedding area, is because this access goes directly into it from these neighbors, and the habitat that is improved to the east side of this is improved correctly. So, perfect example of how to connect these dots together, why designing a stand location in this, such as this location or other locations such as this, is 480 acre farm. And you think that, it gives you a lot of options. It does give you a lot of options. The problem with it is these simple options, the options that make complete sense, are being overlooked because improper habitat is being improved. Food plots are being put in the wrong spot. And all this is being, now keep in mind, all this is being created without having a stand location in mind and building around a stand location and hunting on these destination feed locations. That's where the whole misconnect is with a lot of these farms, especially small parcels is when you start putting these, you start building and starting improving, in a lot of cases over improving, you're improving these farms without the mindset that you have to be able to hunt those locations and not blow those farms, and it happens time and time and time again. So, ending the talk and the walk here, if you will. This situation's got a lot of power. It's got a lot of power. It's probably one of the strongest farms left in this county. Problem with it is it needs a lot of work. The landowner knows it needs a lot of work, but that comes with a price tag as well. And so, ending this on a positive note, after I think I've touched on a lot of obvious notes that just needed to be chatted about, and maybe open some eyes on taking some advice, how to implement the advice, where to implement it. This is a, like I said, it's a video that resonates or starts from stand locations, and I want to end it on a topic of stand location, is because the power of building these parcels is only as good as the stand location that you're hunting from. If you're putting all this together and you can't hunt it, and you're not going to be successful hunting out of a stand location, why are you improving? Why are you doing the improvement at all? The improvement, you're not building these, especially small parcels. You're not building these properties to aid in the health of the deer. You're not controlling. You're helping that situation out, but you're not controlling. It's not a do or die situation on small parcels. It's on not a lot of even large parcels. If you don't encompass the daily movement, the daily life, 365 days a year, 7 days a week of a deer, you are not the area influencer, I guess you could say. You're not the herd builder, and that takes a lot of acreage. Your goal is to be able to set your farm up, especially your small parcel up, to be as powerful as it can be with what you have. Now, it's not 10%, it's not 20%. There's not a number of percentage that you have to have in food plots, but folks, you got to have feed. It can't all come from a form of woody browse. The 40 acres that I was explaining to you in Osceola County, that very powerful farm that the gentleman is working through the hurdles of where and how to get there and how to get there the quickest, is that property. During the analysis, it was told to me that he didn't want to go down the road of a lot of excavation. He didn't want to pull a bunch of stumps. He didn't want to, he felt that these areas that he had were good enough. He got lucky in that design, and most of those areas that he had were in the right locations. But as I explained to him yesterday in an email, there's a lot of those locations that didn't get enhanced the way that they should have get enhanced per my design, because he brought to the table that he didn't want a huge amount of expense as far as excavation, taking stumps out, etc. So with that said, is you have to make those areas that you have perform to the best of their ability. Now, you can go into an area like this and blow a food plot into it. You can make this into a destination feed location. You can feed a lot of deer, but you have to know you can't hunt it. You have to hunt where the deer are going to be, through where they're going to be, not where they're at, not their final landing, not their final destination. And that is the key of having the proper stand location in the proper spot at the right time, during the right wind, and hunting that as frugal as you can possibly make it, so you don't have 480 acres and blow deer out of your strongest bedding area, and the guy next door with 20 acres is killing all the deer that got bumped off from this because it's being hunted incorrectly. Stand location, all because of a stand location that they want to be internal, and it's not working. So, very strong message. It's going to ruffle some feathers, but that's the honest truth. And that is where you're going to find a lot of these videos that I'm doing are going to be more focused on slowing down here a little bit and putting the emphasis on the important topics that are destroying these properties. It doesn't take very long on any social media platform, especially Facebook, hence the reason our Facebook accounts are getting shut down, but by me. It doesn't take very long to reach out and find millions and millions of hours of free information, but it doesn't work. A lot of it is being placed out there by folks that don't have the experience, don't do this full time, that are just telling you what works on their farm. Well, the idea might work on their farm, and that's great, but it has to fit your property. It has to fit your property, and you have to be able to hunt it out of those stand locations. That's what makes this power of an analysis package, boots on the ground with someone with experience, tying those locations together so you can hunt it. You can have the greatest property in the world, like I said. If you can't hunt it, you're not successful on it. Don't improve it. Go hunt state land, travel to different states, go with an outfitter. That is where you need to spend your money. Don't spend your money on habitat improvements, placing them in the wrong spots, and making your small parcel, or any parcel for that matter. Don't spend the money in the wrong places and make powerful properties worse by misinformation and not digging deep into how you can hunt that and be successful. Like I said, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that at 40 acres you have to have 4 acres of food plots. If you don't have 10%, 4 acres, you're not going to be successful. That's not the message here. The message is make those food plots. That's acre, 2 acres, whatever fits your budget, whatever fits your property. Make those food plots the best that they can be. Get the highest tonnage you can get out of them. But the key is you have to be able to hunt it. You have to be able to hunt it and be successful getting in and out of that stand location without blowing deer. It's a huge, it is the number one flaw that happens, especially in the state of Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Those are the top 3 states, especially Michigan, and being number one, is it's a huge issue right now that folks need to be taught and trained on how to go about understanding that it's not about your habitat improvements. It's not about how many habitat improvements you do. It's not about having the best food plot in the world. It's about your stand location. It's about how the design of the food plot that you're putting in, or the switchgrass that you're planting. It's about not having a rifle blind at the end of this and having an acre or a half-acre food plot that darn near touches the steps. That's the power. That's the key. That's the miss. And it sounds. The folks that are watching this you're going to be shaking your heads, but it's the truth. I see it every day. I see it every day that I'm on these properties. That these folks have these properties designed this way, and it's to me, it's getting better. The folks are finally realizing that you have to get these stands off from these destination feed locations. You have to get these stands off the food plots. It doesn't work, period. There's no way around it. If you're one of those guys that are weekend hunters that feel that you're not over pressuring your food plots, pressuring your food plot on one set is over pressuring your food plot, to me. Is because in the state of Michigan, especially when you're hunting the food plots, if you're bumping that location off one time on a small parcel, especially like in the state of Michigan or a high pressured state in general, if you're bumping those food sources off one time ruins everything. Now, you do the math on your expense. I don't know how much you've put into your property, so I'm going to let you do the math here, and maybe we're going to separate these videos a little bit here. But you do the math on one hunt destroys $2,000, $5,000, $1,500 a year that you put into your properties. One hunt. It's a very high percentage equation that is often thrown into the mix of hunting these small parcels that needs to end. To me, I'd rather only hunt that location one time, knowing that my percentage is very high of being successful, or better yet, is to hunt the location that I can hunt time and time again without blowing deer, and to get the full fulfillment, the full return on my investment out of my parcel by being able to hunt that time and time again throughout the farm, throughout the season, and being successful. So it's a huge step that's being overlooked, that's being it's a blindfold effect, if you will. It's a very misleading information. Everybody likes to click the Outdoor Channel on and to see these big name celebrities killing these giant Midwestern deer off food plots. And guys, the reason I'm saying this is because I've been one of those guys. I lived in the state of Illinois, in Pike County. I experienced this firsthand. It's a different world. It's not the same world as the majority of the country. Iowa, Illinois, Kansas, you have to treat them as with the respect that they have. They have the deer that they have there for a reason. Kansas, 25,000 bow hunters. The state of Illinois, 260. I don't know if that's the exact numbers anymore, but that's a totally different platform. So they can get away with that. But I'm here to tell you is if you practice these improvements, these ways of hunting that I teach on this channel, if you practice these ways to improve your property and to be able to hunt your property time in, time out, you will not go to the Midwest, into Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, and hunt the way that those farms are being hunted down there and continuously blow the deer off. A deer that gets blown off in Michigan has the same mindset that a deer in the state of Iowa has. It's pressure influenced. You can get away with it down there, and you can't get away with it up here. Bottom line, should you go down the road of trying to do that and trying to implement that? Absolutely not. I designed my farms in the state of Michigan the exact same way as I designed my farms in the state of Illinois, the state of Iowa, the state of Kansas, the state of Kentucky. All are the same theory. No food plot hunting. Get the stands, get the blinds, get the pressure off your food plots. Hunt in the transition areas and watch your success skyrocket. It sounds simple, but it's a step that every day keeps me in business every day. So it's a experience. It's situation. It's not your fault. I don't want this video to come across. It's very lengthy. I don't want this video to come across as, hey, this guy's saying, none of us know what we're doing. And that's not the point. That's not the point at all. There's a lot of you out there know exactly what you're doing. There's a lot of you out there that have the power to hunt these farms that you're hunting, and to be very successful. And you're taking the advice of the wrong from the wrong platform at the wrong time, during the wrong time of the year, improving these properties in the wrong spots. And then it all ties back to hunting the stand locations. These stand locations aren't chosen, they're not in the right spots, and it's totally destroying the rest of your property. So like I said, you're not finger pointing towards anybody, but I am very direct, being very direct here with some of these videos, and being direct to me is not a deterrent. I'm hoping that these videos being more direct is a good thing, because these are the things that you're not going to hear from anybody else in the industry. And I'm hoping that by walking you through some of these steps and making this situation just as this right here, the power that this property has, and the overlooked #1 tree stand this farm, this parcel is this section, I guess I could say, of the 480 is about 100 acres. One of the #1 tree stands, probably the top 2 stand locations on the entire farm, hasn't had a tree stand in 20 years. And the reason is because a whole lot of other habitat improvement is being done, and rifle blinds are getting put on food plots, and 480 acres. No major Pope and Youngs, not a list of them. And so it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating to see, if you're in my profession, to see something like this happen that can have so much power. And the reason that, like, a state of Michigan is not on the map is because of misinformation, miscued information that is putting these tree stands, these box blinds, on these food plots. And folks just they don't understand that you can't hunt these this way. Now, I've often been asked, it's years ago we've hunted these fields, and you're telling us that we can't, rifle hunt these spots, and everybody has hunted this way. That is the truth. There's a lot of power in that, guys. So there's a lot to be said about that. One of the main things that can be said about that is this: the hunters that we have today, a lot more than hunters that we had before. Things that they used to get away with, your grandfather used to get away with, my father used to get away with during rifle season, you're not going to get away with anymore. And folks say, well, hunter numbers are way down. Well, they're way up compared to the style of hunting that you were taught generations and generations down, sent down from the road from way back. This all stems to the reason that folks hunt on the destination feed locations. It's a very powerful tool. I'm hoping that I'm moving forward here with some videos, you guys understand that taking a situation like this, implementing the correct improvement in this area, bringing these does out to this bedding area, taking a rifle blind off from the destination feed location that's not properly where it should be, and hunting these transition areas, the power that you can find in your properties, it's there. You just have to expose it. I have never been on a farm. I've been on a lot of farms, and I've all over the country, and I feel very blessed for that. And I'm telling you right now, I've never set foot on a farm that didn't have power that I wasn't able to expose, ever. So don't ever be told that these farms it's a 10 acres, it's a 20 acre farm, and or parcel, and it's not in the right spot and I can't do anything with it. Well, we would all like to own 480 acres. But as you can see, the gentleman that owns 480 acres isn't getting any more benefit than a guy that owns 20. So you connect the dots. It's a like I said, a very frustrating situation. It's a very real situation, and my whole goal in this is to finally bring folks to understand that the power that they have in these properties, especially in the state of Michigan, that are being overlooked, aren't being tapped into, and are being influenced by years and years of generation, that we're able to get away with the improper hunting procedures that fit their know-how and their needs at the time. But if you're reaching out on a channel like this, or you're surfing the internet for information about food plots, about destination feed locations, tree stand locations, you're not the same guy that your grandfather was. It's a very powerful message. You're not the same hunter as he was. You're not the same hunter as your father was, and that's fine. That's a new generation. That's how we grow in this world of improvements. That's how we get to the next step. And but those old strategies just don't work in the new world. So we're going to dive deep into some construction part of this coming up, some design parts, and I really want you guys to follow along with the proper way and the power of setting these stand locations, setting your farm up around proper stand locations that can feed back to you, not only with horns on the buck pole, but back to your pocket as far as return on investment. Very lengthy video. I probably lost a lot of you along the way here, but it all ties back to stand stand location, proper stand location. 480 acres. That's the number one or the number two, top two spots, like I said, on this 480 acres being completely blown out because that's the way we hunted it years ago, and that's the way it needs to continue to hunt. So with that being said, take that for what it's worth. Everybody chew on that a little bit, and post comments below. Let's talk about, dig deep into helping everybody, if I don't get ate by the horseflies here in the meantime, about how we can help each other get to the final goal here on properties that are just not exposed, are just being entered and exited improperly, and you're adding to the wrong fuel instead of the improvement. You're adding to the destruction. Thanks, guys.